Hi, in about 20 minutes or less would be great. I would like to talk about the Tertium Caput, or the third chapter of Wheelock, which is on the second group of nouns called the second declension. The second declension. What is a declension? Well, in case you don't remember, I created this fictional day where all the Romans got together, all the Roman grammarians, and they divided up all the nouns. They said, okay, we're going to divide off the nouns. Okay, you all go over here. You're the first group. You're the second groups, third, fourth, fifth groups. There are 5 groups of Latin nouns. We call them 5 declensions, and they've been divided because of certain common features that they have. So the first group of Latin nouns, they let the ladies go first. And so the first group of nouns, the first declension. A declension is basically to decline a noun is to give its nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, vocative, to go down the list of categories. You should know those should be somewhat familiar from Wheelock chapter 2. But anyway, you don't have to have all the fine points down. It's kind of like I tell my son, don't worry about what you don't know today, because you'll know it tomorrow. There's a tendency when you're learning something new to freak out because you don't understand what's in front of you, and what you don't remember is you understand what you freaked out. What's the past tense of freaked? You freaked out about something yesterday that you understand today. So why are you freaking out today over something new? Because tomorrow you'll understand it the same way you were freaking out about something yesterday that you understand today. And so don't just get a brown paper bag, breathe a few times, and don't worry about it. Basically, what do you need to know? That there are 5 groups of noun. You don't even need to know that. We're on our second one. You need to know that there are 2 groups of noun, and that they're called declensions. You don't have to understand why they're called a declension. Ours is not to question why. Ours is just to memorize or die. Just go with it, okay? Don't try to overanalyze it. There is a first declension and there is a second declension. The first group of nouns, the first declension, are mostly feminine. There are a few pain words that look feminine, but they're actually masculine. Again, as far as what's important, you don't need to really understand the pain words to go an awful long way in Latin. And so if you only have enough, I only have enough brain space to remember one thing about these first declension nouns. The thing you should remember is that they're mostly feminine. So, for example, think of female names that end in A. Even in Spanish or French, female names that end in A, that's an artifact of Latin. So Claudia ends with an A. You don't name boys Claudia unless you have a problem. And so Claudia has an A and at the end of it, and it's a feminine noun. And in the same way, nouns that end in A tend to be feminine. Now, don't ever. I'm not a lawyer. The people that invented Latin were not philosophers who made sure that there were no exceptions. Languages almost always have countless exceptions. This is why we have, scars on our head from beating our head against the wall. Don't worry about if you have to nail down every exception, you're going to go crazy. You're going to go insane learning another language. Just flow. Just release your inner hippie and just go with it. So the first group of nouns, they end in an A, pretty much, and they are the first declension. They're mostly feminine. Just to review those endings, let me just pull them on up here. Now these are, we've surgically removed the word from the ending. We took, like a fish, we chopped the tail off of the fish. Why? We like tails. I don't know why we like tails, but we do. And so these are just the letters at the end of these feminine words. Nominative, you might remember, is the case that we put a word in if it's the subject of a sentence. We can tell that a word is the subject of a sentence in Latin because it has a nominative ending on it. And so what does that nominative ending look like? Well, with this first group of nouns, if it's singular, it's just going to be an A, a short A, right there, Claudia. But if I'm talking to several Claudias, or if several Claudias are the subject, the Claudias came by my lunch table. Then it's going to be A-E, Claudii. The Claudias came by. If I'm talking of Claudia, that's the genitive case. This is the book of Claudia. Then I'm going to say Claudii. And you might remember in the previous video over chapter 2, I cried a little with you. We got out Kleenexes and cried over the fact that the genitive singular ending and the nominative plural ending, in fact, that the dative singular ending, is it the Claudias came by? Is it this is the book of Claudia? Or did I give a book to Claudia, dative singular? It's going to all have the same AE at the end of it. Again, we just have to deal with it. See a Latin therapist. Aurum is the genitive plural. These are the books of Claudia's, which makes no sense at all, but I'm going with it because that's, I started with Claudia and I'm gonna stick with it. I see Claudia, that would be accusative singular. Claudiam. Or I see the Claudias, then I would say Claudias, accusative plural, long AS. This was given to me by Claudia. Maybe I would have a preposition, or ab Claudia with a long A, ablative singular. Or this was given to me by the Claudias, Claudiis, ablative plural. And then the vocative. Claudia, come here. That's Claudia with a short A, vocative singular. Or Claudias, come here. Claudii, maybe they're Siamese twins. Anyway, okay, so that's a review of the first declension. We looked at that in the previous video for Wheelock chapter 2. Well, now, if you understand what a nominative, a genitive, a dative, accusative, ablative, a vocative is, again, nominative means the subject, genitive ending, pull an of out of it, dative ending, pull a to, or sometimes FOR, for, out of it. Direct object is the accusative case. The case of prepositions and from and by and so forth, with, ablative case, and then vocative, the case of address. No new things on that front. Just review that in this chapter 3. Review what the cases mean. Make sure that you know by the end of chapter 3 what a nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative mean. Let's consider that deal to be sealed in this chapter. Of course, next chapter we're not even adding as much as this chapter. Wheelock's brilliant. Brilliant textbook of Latin. So we learned about nouns last lesson with the feminines of the first declension. We're starting the second declension today, and then we're going to finish the second declension in the next video from chapter 4. So we're making our way through the book, and with these 3 chapters, chapter 2, 3, and 4, we got the big picture of nouns in the previous chapter with these cases. This chapter, we're nailing down kind of our sense of what these declensions are, and then chapter 4, which is the next lesson, we're going to finish up the second declension. So there's less new things to learn with each of these lessons. We're refining, but you should understand these cases for sure by the end of the next lesson, please. I hope you understood it from the previous one. Okay, I'm stopping talking and moving on to what is the second declension. What is this thing, this second group? So we had all the A first declension feminines line up over here, and then we had the masculine second declension line up here. The second declension is made up of mostly masculine nouns with a sizable neuter minority. And the characteristic, if A was characteristic of the first declension, then U's and O's tend to be more characteristic of the second declension. So what does it look like? Well, let's look at it. I'm going to go ahead and just bring it all up, if you don't mind, so we can look at the whole picture. Again, if you were actually learning Latin to speak, you would get it in your subconscious by kind of getting a feel for it as you heard people talk. But because we don't want to wait that long, and there aren't that many people who speak Latin just out of the blue these days, so let's look at it as a chart so that we can memorize it all very quickly. And so the nominative singular is amicus, which is the word for friend. You may know, if you're a law student, an amicus brief is a friendly brief. It's filed to the court by somebody who's not actually involved in the trial, but somebody who's interested in the trial, has an opinion on the trial, and they file a friendly brief with the court supporting one or another position in the case. and comes from amicus, the Latin word for friend. If you're amicable, I hope you never get divorced, but if you do, an amicable separation would be the best way to do it. Anyway, amicable means friendly, friendly-like. So notice the U that I told you. The second declension has U's and O's, a lot of them at least, and there is a U in amicus. That's nominative. If you want to say, a friend gave me this as the subject of the sentence, amicus would be your game. My friends are coming over, amici, amici. If the rule of accents is, if the second to last syllable is long, it gets the accent. So in amici, that second to last vowel, E, is long, and so it gets the stress. Amici. My friends are coming over. Nominative plural, the subject. This is the book of a friend. Amici. Again, just like with the first declension, it's a little annoying that the genitive singular and the nominative plural have the same form. I'm sorry. But at least with this one, amico, the dative singular, at least that's different. I gave the book to a friend. Amico. If this is the book of my friends, amicorum, genitive plural. Or if I gave this book to friends, amicis, dative plural. I see a friend, amicum, accusative singular. I see friends, amicos, the accusative plural. Now, the ablative, unfortunately, looks the same as the dative. You might have noticed this with in the plural. This was true of the first declension. So again, we just have to live with it. We can't write. There's nobody to write a letter to. They're all dead. You can go, write a letter and dig a hole in Rome and put it in the ground. But anyway, this was done to me by a friend, amico, or this was done to me by friends, amicis. That's ablative singular, ablative plural. And if you want to say, friend, come over here, give me some money, amica is the vocative. Now, a lot of the time, you will notice that the vocative, singular and plural, has the same form as the nominative. In fact, I think the vocative plural, always has the same form as the nominative plural. And in most cases, the vocative singular and the nominative singular are the same. This is the most notable instance where the vocative singular and the nominative singular are different, and it's with the second declension, these masculines. Now, Kyrie is Greek, although I think it did come into Latin. But anyway, there was an old song, Kyrie eleison on the road that I must travel. It's actually Greek. But if you think of Kyrie ending with an E, and it means Lord, have mercy, so that might help you remember that an E is the vocative singular. So amica is a singular friend. Could you lend me some money? So that E is a vocative singular ending. Okay, that is pretty much what is in Chapter 3. But I haven't used up my 20 minutes, so let me quickly review. I want, don't waste brain space. See patterns, see similarities. And so on the chart, on the slide I have up right now, on the left is the second declension that we've just learned, and on the right is the first declension that we learned in the last lesson. I know it's going to bother some of you that these are out of order. Why do you have the second first and the first second? Get over it. But you can see here that there are some patterns. So you'll notice that the genitive singular and the nominative plural, amici, puelli, is the same. So that's a pattern that both the first and the second declension share, that the genitive singular and the nominative plural are plural. In my mind, it sticks that the nominative plural and the nominative plural are both plural. That seems to stick with me. Maybe it doesn't help you at all. Notice here that the genitive plural of the first and second declension both have a rum. They both drink rum. But the O of the second declension is orum, and the A of the first declension is arum. Orum, arum. Don't waste time trying to learn those two separately. Learn them together. They're very similar. Notice in the dative plurals and the ablative plurals, it's ease. So don't waste brain space trying to memorize 4 different things. They're all the same. Dative plurals are the same in the first, second declension, and ablative plurals are the same in the first, second declension. Notice that the ablative singular both has the long kind of stem vowel of that declension. So long O, long A, first declension is A, second declension is O's and U's. That fits, long vowel for the ablative singular. For the second declension, you'll notice that the dative and ablative singular are the same. Unfortunately, the first declension didn't get the memo. And I've already talked a little bit about how the vocative and the nominative are very much the same. Amici, amici, puella, puella, puelli, puelli. Only this vocative singular, the second declension, is the most noticeable exception that you can remember if you know the old song, Kyrie eleison, which you probably don't know because I'm old. Okay, so that is basically, see that there are patterns emerging in the way that these cases, in the forms of these cases. Okay, now, I told you that this chapter is mostly over, but there is a little variation on a theme. There are some masculine, we'll get to the neuters of the second declension in the next lesson. But there are some masculines, even some masculines in the second declension that have a slight variation. So amicus with the US on the end, that's the majority. Yay! But there are some that are like this, puer. Puer is the word for boy. If there are any wives listening to this, I'm sure that you have some husbands who are puerile or act like a child. Puerile is a English word based upon the Latin word puer. Puer is a nominative, masculine, singular noun form. Puer is a noun of the second declension. And you'll notice that in most of its forms, it's normal. So amicus, if you go back and you compare this with the declension of amicus, the way that it goes down the row, so pueri, puero, puerum, puero, that's all the same endings as amicus has. Puerorum, pueris, and I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Remember the rule for accents is if the second to last syllable is long, give it the stress. But if the second to last syllable is short, as in puer here in many cases, then the third to last syllable gets it. So let me repronounce it. Pueri, puero, puerum, puero. In those cases, the accent should be on the U. Now here, because the long O comes before the ending, the second to last vowel is long, it gets the stress. Puerorum, pueris, pueros, pueris, pueri. The U gets it on all these because the second to last syllable is short. Again, being able to pronounce it, not a high priority. If you don't have enough brain space, just laugh at me and say, ha ha ha, I'm not going to pay any attention to you on accents because I don't care. And you'll do just fine, unless you have a teacher for whom accents are important. Okay, so you'll notice that the genitive through accusative have all the same endings in this case. Now, there's another example, ager, field, agriculture. Now, ager has agree in the genitive singular, so it pops that E out like a pimple. Sorry, that's a little gross. But anyway, agree is a little different for ager. But in the case of puer, the E stays. And so in the case of puer, the genitive through ablative all have the same form as amicus. What's different about puer is the nominative singular. Well, that's easy to remember because that's the form you learn in your vocabulary. And then the vocative is going to follow suit. Well, that's okay. I can handle that because vocatives and nominatives often look the same. This pueri is the same. Pueri is the same. So really, for puer, the only strange ones are the nominative singular and the vocative singular. And I can handle that because I learned that strangeness when I memorized it in the vocabulary. And then with another one like ager for field, A-G-E-R, it's going to be agree in the nominative plural and agree in the genitive singular. So that is a little different with that one. And of course, its vocative is going to be ager. We're saving energy here, saving polar bears, and making the light go out annoyingly because I'm not moving around enough. Okay, so puer is a variation on the way second declension nouns can look. This is not rocket science. Get the brown bag out because this is not hard. Once it clicks, you'll say, why did I get all worked up about that? It's just Some things look a little different. This one has a scar on its cheek. Okay, I can handle that. It just looks slightly different. So, second declension, remember, mostly masculine, a few neuters that we'll get in the next lesson. It tends to have U's and O's in the endings. And remember what these cases are. Nominative, the case of the subject. Genitive adds an of. Dative adds the word to. Accusative is the direct object. Ablative will usually have a preposition. Might be a ablative of means, by means of a boy. Vocative is when you're talking to someone. Okay, one more slide, and then this is done. Here are some miscellaneous things that I want to mention from this chapter. So, even with the variation, the adjective endings stay the same. This is something that I want to nip in the bud. That you might think that because, like puer or ager, because puer and ager have some funkiness with their forms, that the adjective is going to have some funkiness too. No, the adjective doesn't have to look like the noun it goes with. The adjective has to match the noun it goes with, but it does not have to look like the noun it goes with. So an adjective has to agree in case, in number, and in gender. If the noun the adjective is telling you about, if you want to talk about the hairy bear, and if bear is masculine singular, then hairy has to be masculine singular. If bear is nominative, then hairy has to be nominative. If bear is dative, then hairy has to be dative. So the adjective has to agree with the noun it is telling you about. It is modifying in case, number, and gender, but it does not have to look like it. Its inner heart has to be the same. It has to agree in spirit, in case, number, and gender, but it does not have to have the same form. That's important. If that doesn't make any sense to you now, it will one day. Okay, another concept introduced in this chapter is apposition. Apposition is when a noun is put next to, pono, put, I guess next to. Anyway, put next to. So, to explain it. So, when I say Jesus the Christ tells me about Jesus. So, whenever that's the case, the noun in apposition, that is the explanatory noun that comes after, is going to be put in the same case as the noun it's telling us about. So if I talk about Jesus the Christ, and he's the subject of the sentence, Jesus is going to be nominative because it's the subject of a sentence. Christ is going to be nominative because it's telling us about Jesus, and Jesus is nominative. If Jesus is genitive, then Christ is going to be genitive, not because an of is going to come out of it, but because Christ is telling us about Jesus. If Jesus is dative, then Christ is going to be dative, not because the word to is going to jump out, but because Christ is telling me about Jesus. If Jesus is accusative, Christ is going to be accusative. If Jesus is ablative, Christ is going to be ablative. The reason is not because Christ, in that case, is going to have the function of an ablative or a genitive, but it's going to just be in apposition to Jesus, and it's going to go along. You're just going to say Jesus Christ, of Jesus Christ, to Jesus Christ, I see Jesus Christ. You're not going to pull a new word out of Christ just because it's in the genitive. Because Christ is just telling you, it's just telling you about Jesus. And so you just put Jesus and then put Christ after it. And if Jesus is genitive, the of is going to come out of Jesus. But it's not going to come out of Christ because Christ is just telling me about Jesus. If that doesn't make any sense, it will once we do some exercises. Read the chapter. He's clearer than I am. I've just muddled things up, haven't I? Finally, this chapter gives us some standard word order. You've seen in the exercises from chapter 2 that subject, object, verb is the normal Latin word order, as opposed to English, which is subject, verb, object, right? We say Ken hits ball, subject, verb, object. But in Latin, the normal order is subject, object, verb. Ken ball hits. Well, we can flesh that out and say that the normal order in Latin is the subject, the indirect object, the direct object, any adverbs that go with the verb, and then the verb. That's the normal Latin order. It doesn't have to be in that order. He does some fun things at the end of chapter 3 about different word orders. Please read chapter 3. Now, of course, there can be modifiers too. So subject and anything modifying it, adjectives, so forth. Subject and its modifiers, indirect object and its modifiers, direct object and its modifiers, any adverbs, and then the verb. That's kind of the starting point for word order in Latin. Well, have I tortured you enough? I've gone 24 minutes. I'll go with that. 25, and we'll stop there.